Hello, Riderflex Nation. Steve Urban here. Another great guest for you today. I have my good friend Ray Gallo on the phone, the senior partner of Gallo LLP. How you doing, Ray?
Terrific. Nice to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Hey, I know all about you, of course, but for our listeners, tell us a little bit about yourself. Just kind of give us a brief overview, where you're from and where you went to school, stuff like that.
All right, sure. Grew up on the central coast of California, a little fishing town about halfway between LA and San Francisco. Um, I was young and ambitious and trundled off to Yale in New Haven, Connecticut, where I spent 4 years before heading back to California for law school at UCLA and wound up in LA for many years practicing law. And was in the San Francisco area for the last, 12 or so. So there you go.
Okay, great. Tell us a little bit about Gallo LLP, areas of practice and I know you've been very successful. Maybe you can share a couple of the biggest wins so far for you.
Sure. Well, we were originally all commercial stuff. My clients were business people, and I've always enjoyed representing them, and I still do. We primarily did business litigation. We did some general transactional work as a litigator, as a guy who sees how things go bad. I've always found that it's really a great base for trying to do transactions if you're the kind of guy who can make deals, not just mess them up. And I've been a salesman many times in my life, and of course that's basically what good trial lawyers are, is like salesmen as well. And about 10, 15 years ago, I just got really tired personally as a consumer of businesses that didn't seem to care about the difference between marketing and fraud. Mm-hmm. And I started doing more work representing consumers, and we've handled some large-scale consumer fraud cases. The stuff I'm most known for is getting $60 million out of the Le Cordon Bleu U.S. schools, which were owned by a New York Stock Exchange traded company that didn't care that by selling these mostly young folks a $50,000 12-month course of instruction and leading them to believe they would be chefs, they were not really telling the truth. And these people basically never became chefs and always wound up insolvent. So we did a little bit to fix that problem.
That's what I love about you when we first met. I've known lawyers all my life, but it's you just really have the passion for helping people, right? It's not just about winning the case. It's not just about making the money, but you truly do have a passion for helping people that have been wronged. I really appreciate that about you and your firm. What?
Yeah, the money.
Go ahead.
The money doesn't really. It pays for things, and you wouldn't do all this hard work without it, but it isn't the motivator. What's the motivator for me is always helping people. And I have to confess, Steve, I love to win.
Absolutely. What key advice would you give a new attorney just finishing law school and passing the bar? Looking back now, what would you say to somebody, just getting out of law school?
What were you thinking? Which is actually what lawyers have said to young people thinking about going into the law forever. The law has a very low rate of professional satisfaction because by and large it's a hard job. It's a job that tends to be long hours and a lot of hard work. There are entrepreneurial jobs and business jobs, a career more like you've had, that arguably are more fun. But if you love to compete, or you love grinding out the details, you can obviously make a good living as a lawyer. And if, like any line of work, if you happen to be the talented one who works harder than everybody else, it can be very good.
You've also had a career as an investor and as a startup business owner. I know you have, several other things you've done. How did you get that entrepreneurial bug? Where did that come from? The desire to be involved in startups and small business?
Man, I think that's just a personality problem of some kind.
Right. I have that too, by the way.
Yeah, it's just I'm one of those people who looks at things and decides that, like, wait a minute, there's a better way to do this, and this isn't the efficient way to do it. And hey, well, if nobody else is fixing this, maybe I should fix this. And
Right.
sometimes I actually give it a shot. But Steve, that the startup business world is, man, it's tough. It's tough, and most stuff doesn't get off the ground, and most of the stuff gets off the ground doesn't last very long, and
Right.
most of the stuff that lasts very long doesn't, end in a super lucrative way. So, you have to do it because you love it, and I've been fortunate. I haven't had any big losses, but that's just because most of the time I think better of it before I put too much money where my thoughts are.
You are very careful, which I appreciate about you. What is there one piece of, I know there's probably, you could write a book about it, but are there a couple of key pieces of advice you would give somebody looking to start their own business, leaving the corporate world, so to speak, and starting their own business?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, having given that last cautionary tone, I would say this, that if you are the kind of person who can handle risk, and especially if you're the kind of person who can handle not making much money for a while, you can make a lot of money being self-employed. It is a better gig in a lot of senses, and I see that because of this basic concept that people don't think about, called the risk premium. Have you heard people talk about this? The risk premium in the context of a startup?
I haven't. I'm glad you're bringing that up, though, for the listeners. Please go ahead.
So here's what it is, right? The bottom line is that you will get paid more on average for taking risks that other people just don't want to take. Just like you got to get paid more for, shoveling cow manure. Other people don't want to do it, right? If you're the guy who can handle it, you get paid more. And so entrepreneurs, if they're successful, you take a guy like you, right? Put you in a startup. If you're willing to do that and take the financial hit up front and the risk of the long-term investing of years of your time, if you're successful, no more successful than you would have been working for somebody else, right? Mm-hmm. By being employed and taking that risk yourself, you get paid a lot more money. So when people say, oh, those entrepreneur guys, startup guys, they're making tons of money. Well, first of all, sometimes they don't make any money. Sometimes They go broke.
Most times.
And because they took that risk, right? When it happens really big. And on average, it'll pencil out. I mean, you can do something simpler, right? Something like my business, which is very risky, but not as risky as a startup in the sense that I can work hourly and I can diversify across 10 cases or 20 cases or whatever that I'm handling. And on average, it works out, and I make more money than some other people because I take a lot of risk. The amount of risk I take would make most people sick.
Right.
I managed to hedge it. I managed to manage it, and God bless her, my wife puts up with it, I guess, because I usually manage to make it work out pretty well.
Right.
But, it's a big thing. And so people who want to have a startup, like, yeah, you know what? If you can handle the risk and you're have a reasonable belief that you're the guy who can make that happen, mm-hmm. and there's no quit in you and you're willing to work your ass off, by all means. Right, it's a nice way to live. You don't have to let some other person or company decide your life for you.
Right.
But you also don't have a big company behind you when you have a problem. So.
That's correct. I really believe, most people just have no idea how hard it is, really. I mean, it's really hard to do a startup, and it takes a lot of hours. You've been very successful in your career, not only as a lawyer, but as a business owner. Congratulations, by the way, on everything you've done. If you could look back now at your very young age, if you could look back at your 21-year-old self, let's take it back to 21, and you could talk to that guy, the young Ray Gallo, what pieces of advice would you give him today?
Patience,
more patience. Okay.
Humility.
Right. Because the reality. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was a talented guy in a lot of ways, I suppose, but I was young and I was impatient, and I didn't want to listened to people I thought, weren't, lacked vision or whatever, and I just think that the bottom line is that staying in the corporate fold longer and listening more and asking more questions, and I would have come to self-employment with a greater skill set. Having said that, Steve, honestly, it's like I made it work because I did have mentors, did have people I could call when I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And, I've been self-employed for all but 6 months since I was 29.
That's fantastic. And that's great advice. I would probably tell myself the same. Humility, patience, talk less, listen more. I mean, great advice really for younger folks that, type A guys like we are, we at the age of 21, we were pretty cocky, right? We knew everything.
Oh man, I know so much stuff, right? When I was 29.
And then real quick,
a lot more than I know now, right?
Right. Exactly. And then if I can just move just real quickly, a lot of our podcast listeners are job seekers or they're looking to make a career change. I wanted to ask you, you've interviewed and hired a lot of people over the years. Can I just ask, what are a couple of questions that you love to ask during an interview and why?
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, if I'm going to give advice to people who are thinking about changing jobs or managing their careers, let me just give away some nice information. I have represented in employment negotiations my Yale classmates and a bunch of their Harvard Business School classmates and a bunch of other friends. And as a result of doing those things, I realized that somebody really needed to write a good guide. And so one weekend I sat down and I wrote the bones of a book, and that is posted at gallo.law, GALLO.LAW. And anybody who wants it can grab it for free.
That's great.
And if it's ever published, it'll, if I ever finish it, publish it, it'll cost a lot more than that. But in the meantime, you can just go there and grab it in PDF.
Fantastic.
And help yourselves. And there's a lot of good advice about how to manage your relationship with your employer and negotiate for an agreement and even get it in writing. That's posted there. So as far as questions, Steve, I think I'm a terrible interviewer. That's why I hire you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the nod there. How about this then? Let me ask you this. How about common mistakes? Maybe that, like, is there just 2 or 3 things that, that stand out in your mind where you're thinking, oh gosh, I see these people make this mistake all the time?
Well, how about this? I think this is great. I actually got this piece of advice from a good friend of mine, Tad Smith, who's actually currently CEO of Sotheby's, so he's done pretty well for himself. But Tad once told me that, when you're hiring somebody, there are only 2 questions. Can they do the job? And will they do the job? And so whatever anybody's asking you, realize that those are the questions.
Oh, that's great advice.
That you're answering.
That's great advice. That's great. You're absolutely right. That's great. You just make sure that they're geared towards one of those 2, right, or both. That's fantastic. Ray, I could keep you on the phone for another hour. I really appreciate your time. I know it's super valuable. Let's wrap up with this. One of my favorite questions that another mentor asked me one time, it kind of stumped me a little bit. He said, Steve, what's your core purpose in life? And I tried to give him a cheesy answer like, take care of my family or make the world a better place. And he really pushed me beyond that. He said, no. Professionally, what truly is your core purpose? How would you answer that one, Ray?
Professionally. So excluding the obvious,
right.
We're really all doing it to take care of our families, which is true, right? Okay.
Right.
Most of what I do these days is litigation. I still do some transactions, and in transactions, I really am looking to create value and protect my clients' reasonable expectations and make deals that work. That's back to that efficiency thing we talked a little earlier. Just you're actually creating something, and really good contracts, really good deals make value creation possible. And silly little things like jobs and profits that make the world go round. And I do for some reason I have a love of that, right? I feel like I really added something and I made a difference. And then someday when the other side tries to screw my client, it's like, no, I cover that on the contract. And I like that a lot.
That's
but
great.
Then on the litigation side, which is most of what I do, man, I just love justice. I get real motivated when somebody tries to screw somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Can I say that on a podcast?
Yeah, you can.
It just most of the time I'm a pretty mellow guy. I grew up in California. I'm pretty easy, but you start lying, cheating, or stealing, and that fires me up. And I always joke with people on the other side. It's like that's a mistake because I'm the nicest guy in the world. But baby, fire me up, and now I'm motivated. I will be up all night making sure that you don't get what you're hoping for.
That's great, my friend. And that's really, you can just feel the passion even talking to you on this podcast. And you, by the way, you make a difference in people's lives every day, including my own, my friend. And thank you for being a huge supporter of Riderflex. We really appreciate it. And thank you for your time today on today's call. Fantastic advice. Can't wait to get this one uploaded for the fans. Thank you so much, Ray, for joining us. Appreciate it, sir.
My pleasure, Steve.
Take care. We'll talk to you soon.
I'll look forward to it.
Okay, bye-bye.